Hey, what's up, guys? Vigilant Texan here, back for another video. I got my shirt on here. I wish it was spelled right and it said Yahusha instead of Yeshua, but gotta celebrate, my fellow brother's ministry. It's a nice shirt. It's a question answer. People see this one here, this symbol here. They're like, what's that mean? That's the Melchizedek crown with the Father's name on it. So today's video is called The Ravenous Wolf of Benjamin. Wonder who we could be talking about there. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Saul or Shaul, which in Hebrew, if you translate it, is Sheol or death. In Greek, it means the least. You might know him as Paul of Tarsus. Wikipedia openly admits that he's a liar. If you just go look the guy up, it says that the Acts of the Apostles also contradict Paul's epistles on multiple accounts, in particular concerning the frequency of Paul's visits to the church in Jerusalem. So they're saying if you just... And what's crazy is Acts is his court document that he brought. Him and Luke brought Acts and Luke to court when he was getting tried. And then he goes and contradicts his own court letters with his own other letters. Of course, Paul can never keep his facts straight. And I know a lot of people passionately love and believe this guy Paul, and he's like almost, they hold him in higher regard than Messiah. So I want to try to be touchy here and not as condescending as I may have been in some of my previous videos, like the one about the millennial reign. Going back and watching, I realized I was a little sarcastic and obnoxious, and we'll try not to go there with Paul. But it's tough because, when I left the Christian church and got into Torah, it's like you're fighting against Paul, trying to get Christians to keep the commandments. All they go to is Paul. And so it's like, but whenever you go Torah observant and you get in the Messianic community, you immediately meet these staunch Paul supporters who are Torah observant. So you get these two different types of Paulinian religious folks. You got the Christian Paulinians who use Paul's words to justify not keeping the Torah and not doing the commandments and not having to do anything, just believing. And when you run into those folks and you confront them about Paul, they're usually just very surprised, and they kind of want to just run back to their preacher and ask questions, or just kind of blow you off and say, well, I know I'm saved, I believe in Jesus or whatever, and then just try to dismiss you or whatever. But boy, if you run into one of the other Paulinians, the Torah observant ones, now they've got scripture and this and that and the other to support why Paul is a Torah teacher. But we're gonna meet both of those camps head on in this video, and we're gonna break it all down and talk about it. There's just a few things that Paul's believers do that's not what our Messiah would have you doing, and I'm here to point them out today, and let's talk about it. So, Wikipedia says he's a liar. Our Messiah called the Pharisees, that he is a group within the group of Pharisees, our Messiah called them the synagogue of Satan. Saul was a verified and proclaimed, historically verified Pharisee, born of Pharisees, he calls it. He studied under Gamaliel, who called himself a prince and a master. Our Messiah said, let no man call you master. According to Wikipedia, Gamaliel holds a reputation in the Mishnah for being one of the greatest teachers in all of the annals of Judaism. I myself would like to stay out of the annals of Judaism, but Shaul was all up in there. Anyway, more from Wikipedia. It reports that Acts says that he was an artisan involved in leather crafting, which is a money-making industry that profits off of the abuse of animals, obviously. So he would have had this ingrained. It's Americans have it too. It's speciesism. It's thinking that the animals were here for us, just as objects that we can exploit. There's some sort of disposable resource we can just churn through to make our own ends, and it's very sad. But clearly, so being in this leather industry, he would have had this speciesism ingrained in from a young age. They also report that Paul says that prior to his conversion, he persecuted the early Christians beyond measure. We have reports that he murdered some of them. What they don't tell you, though, like when I was growing up learning in Christianity, is they don't tell you that, that before his conversion, that it was actually the members of Messiah's close-knit posse that he was going after. Like when it says that he persecuted the church in Jerusalem, the early Christians, like it literally meant James and Peter. Really suggest, if you haven't read it, hit me up. I can give you the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, along with the recognitions and homilies of Clement. That's really basically the real story of the Acts of the Apostles. If you're interested, it gives you a lot of more detail of kind of the back and forth between, they call him Simon Magus. I believe the Catholic Church had to change the name, but Paul is who they're going against in those books. Let's try to stay on topic here. So he was against the followers of the Messiah originally, and according to Paul's court document, the book of Acts, then it took place on the road to Damascus, where he reported having experienced a vision of the ascended Jesus. The account says that he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The reply came, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Now, we can take note here that Damascus is in the desert. Okay. But our Messiah said, "For as the lightning comes from the east and shines to the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. But if they say to you, 'Look, he's in the desert,' don't go out. Or, 'Look, he's in the inner rooms,' don't believe." So Messiah just had a built-in warning about Paul in his writings. So he says he saw him in the desert. Oh yeah, Jesus came down, descended down to me and told me this new gospel. Oh really? Where was it? Oh, I was in the road to Damascus. Really? Interesting. And then the one other place that Paul claims he saw the Messiah was when he went to Jerusalem, right? "And it came to be when I returned to Jerusalem, and while I was praying in the set apart place," so he claimed to be in the temple, "I came to be in a trance, and I saw him saying me, 'Hurry, get out of Jerusalem speedily, because they shall not accept your witness concerning me.'" Now, that's some secret room in the temple, right? They say he's in the inner room. Don't believe. But not only that, but look what he tells him. He tells him to run and hide. Like, come on. Is that the spirit of Messiah? Is this not for me? When I call him Messiah, he gives me strength and confidence. And he would have told him, "Hey, you got me. That's all you need. Let's go confront these men of God," or whatever. But no, his Jesus told him to run and hide. So, not really believing Paul there. My Messiah, yeah, exactly. I'm just gonna read that. I found all these cool pictures of like wolf in sheep's clothing. It's like after that one, so like it's like a wolf here. And then this one. It's just so enjoy the wolf in sheep's clothing pictures as we go along here. All right. The name Benjamin means right hand, right? Our Messiah said, if your right hand offends thee, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it's profitable for thee to cut that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into Gehenna. Matthew 5 is for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into Gehenna. So like, it would be better for you not to believe Paul and to just throw that part of the Bible out than to be so hell-bent on believing the whole Bible and end up taking the wide path. Now, the tribe of Benjamin, there's some interesting ties in there. Jacob's beloved Rachel died on the side of the road giving birth to Benjamin, and she didn't get buried in the cave of Machpelah with the rest of the patriarchs' wives. But you might be thinking to yourself, like, well, if Paul was against Messiah, and most of you are probably thinking now, like, well, what is it? What does he preach that's not the same as Messiah? We're going to get there, chill. But why? How did they get there? Well, there's this thing called dispensationalism that pretty much all Christianity believes. And there's really no way, as I'll show you, that they could have come with this idea of dispensationalism without Paul's letters. But basically what it means is that there's these different dispensations of God, right? Is a theological framework of interpreting the Bible which maintains that history is divided into ages or dispensations in which God acts with his chosen people in different ways, right? Dispensationalists use a literal interpretation of the Bible and believe that divine revelation unfolds throughout the Bible. They believe there's a distinction between Israel and the church, and that Christians are not bound by Mosaic law. See, there's your catch. So they believe that this little chart here, this is innocence, human government, and then here's Israel, they got the promises and the law, and then here's the cross, and then you have this different age here where people get treated with grace, and then later back in the kingdom there's different. So they're saying that each one of these different little things, God might judge the people that lived during those times differently. Like, let's say you were born as an Israelite in the Old Testament, you would have had to follow the law and be judged accordingly. But you could be born now and be a Gentile Christian, as they would say, and you don't have to follow those laws. You'd be judged differently, right? But in Malachi, Yahweh says, I am Yah. I change not. So it feels like a contradiction here, right? And, Genesis 1:29, every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, every tree in which there is fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be food. Every green herb is for food. That was the original command. So I think to believe anything different would mean that God changed his mind. And that's really what people teach. They teach that after the flood we could eat animals, and then after Moses they could eat certain animals. Like, here I am being condescending again. Let's not go there. All right. So as it mentions here, they believe Christians are not bound by Mosaic law. They believe our Creator changes what he desires and applies different requirements to us based on who we are or when we are alive. But Peter said in Acts that Elohim shows no partiality to people. Does Yah contradict himself? How about when they were exiting Egypt? It didn't matter whether you were a natural born or a stranger that sojourns among, as long as they walked in the commandments, right? In Deuteronomy, when the 10 commandments are given, it also says that anyone who hears his voice and keeps the commandments and shall guard to do as Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to do, and not turn aside to the right or to the left, but to walk in the ways which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, so that you will live and it will be well with you, and you shall prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. So how can he say then that it applies to everyone, but then later say, oh, well, then now the cross has happened, so we can follow different rules, right? I think we need to watch out for the rabbis. Right? Beware the scribes and Pharisees, like Paul was both. But back to dispensationalism. So this guy that got accredited with it was this Darby guy, John Nelson Darby. And all you got to do is read his book titled Doctrine to see that he was clearly an occultist who studied Kabbalism. Because in their book, John Nelson Darby the Freemason, the Liberty for Captive group states that John Nelson Darby, the father of dispensationalism, used occult languages throughout his doctrinal writings and letters. Occult language. The majority of the phrases are found in Kabbalistic theological literature. John Nelson Darby learned these esoteric terms somewhere, not from the Bible, and then deliberately integrated them into his theological treatises and letters. His practice of merging theological vocabulary with supposed biblical teachings is a form of syncretism. The question more, though, is like, why? Why would anyone have ever suggested such a thing? Well, it's because they don't want to follow the words of our Messiah. He came to say his Father's words, and for many, those are too tough. So, if they could just convince people that his words are not for them and were somehow only for the Jews, then you can change what's required of us as children of the Most High. I will show that it's only the words of Saul or Paul, that ravenous wolf, that could have convinced Darby that his occult ideas could be applied to the faith. Since Saul said in Romans that the law of God is akin to walking in the flesh, and that he has a new doctrine of the Spirit, he claims that since his supposed encounter with the risen Christ was not a fleshly one, that it somehow makes his doctrine and belief and doctrines of belief and faith alone, without obeying commandments, more superior to anything what he calls fleshly. Okay? Unfortunately, these ideas go directly against the words of our Messiah and his prophets. And if you were to believe this dispensationalism, this idea that after the cross, that there's a new, different gospel that was revealed to Paul that's different than what the Messiah preached, and that when Messiah was here preaching, that was before the cross, is what they'll tell you. And so he was actually preaching to the Jews there, that his words are for the Jews. I've literally heard this from Christians, and that it's Paul who teaches you how to be the New Testament church and a New Testament believer or whatever. So, what happens when you believe that stuff? Well, Paul's the only person in the Bible you have to listen to. Anything else you can just throw out. You can say, well, that was pre-cross, or well, that was in the Old Testament, that was for the Jews, or whatever. Okay. You have to make the assumption that our Messiah was ignorant in his earthly ministry and was only speaking to the Jews, like I said, that he could not see the end from the beginning, that he chose apostles who could not perform the mission he had for them, obviously, or else we wouldn't need Paul. His apostles were ignorant and fleshly because they only knew Messiah in a fleshly manner, and they weren't aware of this new doctrine of the Spirit that Paul supposedly brings in. And you're no longer judged for disobedience, or only whether or not you believe this new church gospel, right? And what is this gospel? Well, the Roman road, right? Just call Jesus Lord, believe a few biographical facts about him, get dunked in the water, and you're saved. Ding, 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 forever, no matter what. Not only that, but if somebody sins against you, you got to forgive and accept them back as family members in Christ, as long as they claim the blood of Jesus. I mean, see Paul's letters taught by Christians. Like, these ideas are literally what Christians go around believing. No wonder so many people get saved and then go on and live a life of sin in this Paulinian faith, right? And you know, when you get into it with the Torah observant Paul people, you know, they're trying to argue that Paul taught Torah, you know, doing all these word gymnastics, jumping back and forth between Romans and other books, trying to show that Paul taught Torah. And I try to tell him, it doesn't really matter whether you think he taught Torah or not. If Christianity has these dogmas that they teach their people based on Paul's letters, then it doesn't matter whether you think they're confused. If they're using his letters to justify these teachings, it doesn't matter if they're confused. Peter said people are going to get confused in his letters and rest in their sins and rest in their lawlessness. Yes, I know, but that doesn't mean that Paul taught Torah. Or maybe he did try to teach a little bit of Torah. Maybe he did in a few places say that we should keep the law or something like to that gist. But doesn't really matter, because the guy clearly said in other places stuff that's blasphemous. But let's kind of use some of our Messiah's words. So another theme with our Messiah that goes against listening to Paul over him is that a taught one is not greater than his master. And he says it in quite a few verses here. In Matthew 10, he says, he who shall endure to the end shall be saved. And when they persecute you in this city, flee to one another. For truly I say to you, you shall by no means have gone through the cities of Yasharel before the Son of Man comes. A taught one is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It's enough for the taught one to become like his teacher, and a servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more of those of his household? Matthew 10. A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. Luke 6. So, once you're fully trained, you're not going to suddenly teach something different than what the teacher taught, right? He who comes from above is over all. He who is from the earth is of the earth, and speaks of the earth. He who comes from the heaven is over all. And what he has seen and heard, that he witnesses, and no one receives his witnesses. He who receives his witness has sent his seal that Elohim is true. For he whom Elohim has sent speaks the words of Elohim. For Elohim does not give the Spirit by measure. The Father loves the Son and has given all into his hand. He who believes on the Son possesses everlasting life. But he who does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of Elohim remains on him. So we actually have to obey Messiah's words, not some other someone who claims to be an apostle. Later in John, for I gave you an example that you should do as I have done. Right? Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is an emissary greater than he who sent him. So, if you're trying to elevate Paul's words above Messiah's, you're going against the Messiah. Now, Saul admitted to being possessed by a demon in his letters, and he couldn't get rid of it. He prayed to his Christ, and he couldn't even help, which makes me think it was an angel of Satan he was possessed with, and that it was an unclean spirit that he thought was Messiah, right? He says in Corinthians, and to keep me from exalting myself because of exceeding greatness of the revelations. So he's always trying to exalt himself. A thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to hit me, to keep me from exalting myself. Concerning this, I pleaded with the master 3 times to take it away from me, and he said to me, my favor is sufficient for you. My power is perfected in your weakness. Well, that doesn't sound like something Messiah would say. Most gladly then I shall rather boast in my weakness. So the power of Messiah rests on me. So he's like just trying to say that that's a good thing or something. Whatever. That's a good one there. Later he used Jesuit tactics of pretending to be as your subjects are to blend in, then to influence from within. I would consider this bearing false witness. To the weak I become weak, to win the weak. To all men I become all, so as to save some by all means. To those without Torah, as without Torah. Not being without Torah toward Elohim, but under Torah of Messiah, so as to win those who are without Torah. And to the Yahudim, I became as a Yahudi, that I might win the Yehudim. To those who are under Torah, as under Torah. To those, so as to win those who are under Torah. So it's like he's justifying bearing false witness to try to save more souls, you know. But what does Messiah say? You know, you go, paraphrasing, you'll go to the ends of the earth to proselyte someone and to bring them in, only to teach them a bunch of falseness and get them even further away from the truth. Really paraphrasing. According to Christianity, we need Paul to explain the Christian faith. But what's the Bible say? It says the words of our Messiah are sufficient and forever. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words shall by no means pass away, right? And Yeshua answered and said to them, take heed that no one leads you astray, for many shall come in my name, saying, I know the Messiah, and they'll lead many astray. Like Paul. For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinning generation, of him the Son of Man also shall be ashamed, and when he comes to the esteem of his Father with the set apart messengers. Then the Deuteronomy 18, where Moses predicts the Messiah coming and basically says you're going to have to obey him. For Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brothers. Listen to him according to all you asked of Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb on the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my Elohim, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die. And Yahweh said to me, what they have spoken is good. I shall raise up for them a prophet like you out of the midst of their brothers, and shall put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be, the man who does not listen to my words which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. What else does Paul say that kind of goes against Messiah? Well, in Romans, he says, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, you know. But our Messiah says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, and calls on my name shall enter in the reign of heaven, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in heaven. Right? Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, or cast out demons in your name, and done many works in your name? And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. Rain came, floods came, winds blew, beat the house up, but it didn't fall because it was founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them shall be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the floods came, the winds blew, and they beat on the house, and it fell. And this is like many Christians. They talk a great game, but when the tribulation comes, they go right into sin. When the temptation comes, they jump right into bed. We're going to get into that, why that happens to these Paulinians. But let's get some more words of Messiah, because it is really the words of Messiah that crush Paul more than anything. Then Yahushua spoke to the crowds, to his taught ones, and saying, the scribes and Pharisees sit on the seat of Moses. Therefore, whatever they say to you to guard and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. They do all their works to be seen by men, and they make their tephilim wide and lengthen the tzitzit of their garments, and they love the best place at the feasts, and the best seats in the congregation, and the greetings in the marketplace, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But you don't be called Rabbi, for only one is your teacher, the Messiah. You're all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for Messiah is your father. For one is your father, he who's in heaven. Neither be called leaders, for one is your leader, Messiah. But the greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself shall be humbled. Right? Who's exalting himself? It's Paul, man. It's Paul, that Catholic, that first Catholic. They based their whole Catholic faith on this guy. Anyway. Do not think that I come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. For truly, truly, I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one yod or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah, till all be done. Now remember, the Torah doesn't contain animal sacrifices. I got into it one day. I was talking to somebody today debating about whether the sacrifices will be reinstated when the millennia comes. Nope. Although the Levite priest would have you believe that. But anyway, whoever then breaks one of these least commandments and teaches men so shall be called the least in the reign of heaven, right? Isn't that what Paul's name means? But whoever does them and teaches them shall be called great in the reign of heaven. For I say unto you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, Paul was a Pharisee, you shall by no means enter into the reign of heaven. I am come to end the sacrifices and the feasts of blood. And if you cease not offering and eating of flesh and blood, the wrath of God shall not cease from you, even as it came to your fathers in the wilderness, who lusted for flesh, and they ate to their content, and were filled with rottenness, and the plagues consumed them. And I say to you, though you be gathered together in my bosom, if you keep not my commandments, I will cast you forth. For if you keep not the lesser mysteries, who shall give you the greater? Gospel of the Holy 12. Got a copy if you want it. Just hit me up. I will send you a PDF copy with the sacred names and everything, man. It's awesome. So, another thing they didn't really teach us growing up in church was that the books of the New Testament were kind of written against each other, but you know, when you place them in the order they're placed in, they don't seem that way, right? If you didn't know that the book of John was actually written after the other three Gospels and after most of Paul's books, if you read it first, not knowing any of that, then you don't understand that it's actually preaching directly against Galatians. It just sounds like, well, this is a cool way to start the New Testament. Believe this, believe that. And, you know, the book of John, the Gospel of John, doesn't even have a crucifixion story. It just kind of feathers off at the end there, like, and that's because, like I said, the other three Gospels already existed. So John didn't feel like he needed to put all the details of Messiah's crucifixion in there. He just needed to correct Paul. So, you know, once you realize that the word pistue means to obey and not to believe the way they translated it, then the book of John really is like a double down on the fact that you have to obey Christ and keep the law. When you read it back through there, you realize it. So what's crazy is that you realize that Galatians was kind of like the first book of the New Testament written, and that it was Galatians that spawned James to write the book of James, and John to write the book of Revelation, and then Paul writes Corinthians and really gets himself into trouble, and then there's the big tussle, the people fighting back and forth with Jerusalem, and like it's a big fight between James and Peter and the ones who Messiah left in charge, and Paul and his Pharisees and his group of Gentile believers or whatever. And, you know, it comes down to the big showdown in the book of Acts, and we get to the part where they give the decree, and they say, you know, you can't eat anything that bleeds, you can't eat blood, you can't commit whoredoms, and you can't eat meat sacrificed to idols. And Paul comes right back and lies about what the decree says and preaches that it's okay to do some of those things. And that's the big problem. And, you know, I don't even know whether John, the real John, wrote Revelation. Maybe he did, and then they edited it up. But it's definitely a lot different than the other books. Now, they can say one of the reasonings behind is that John got him a scribe after he was at Patmos, this Procor guy who helped him write the Gospel and the other books of John, which could be very true. And, you know, the book of Revelation has some very interesting things in it, but it also contradicts some of the other prophets when it comes down to the end times. The book of Revelation predicts that Satan will be loosed for a little season after the Messiah's reign, but that's the only place where that's ever mentioned or suggested. All the other apocryphal texts mention that the Messiah's kingdom will be forever. But anyway, didn't mean to get too far off script there. But that literally is it. What's the most condemning thing about Shaul? Well, he teaches the teachings of Balaam, which is talked about in the book of Revelation as still being a problem in the end times. And what is the teaching of Balaam? Well, it's that it's okay to eat meat sacrificed to idols. Originally with Balaam and the Israelites, he couldn't curse them. And they eventually set up 7 slaughter places. where they started sacrificing animals and offering up the meat to the Israelites. And in Numbers 25 it says, they invited the people to the slaughterings of their mighty ones, and the people ate and bowed down to their mighty ones. And soon Israel dwelt in Shittim, and the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. And so they attracted them with their food, with the meat sacrificed to idols, and it turned into sexual perversion, which it's like a 1-2 punch. Bam, bam. You start eating the meat, you start getting that fleshly desire for lust, you start living in a base vibration all the time, very hungry, very just always, I just gotta get full, I need a little more. It's very, so I was there, man, for years. I was a meathead. I grew up in Texas. But what does Paul say about eating meat? He says, well, if any of you unbelievers invites you and you wish to go, you eat whatever the hell's set before you. And don't ask any questions. Just chomp it on down. Like, oh, these guys over here, it looks like they're serving meat at these groves. What do you think we should do, Paul? Gee, let's go eat some of that, says Paul. Paul says, you eat whatever is sold in the meat market. Ask no questions. Like, what? Can you, that's the worst advice ever. Just go in there and buy whatever meat they're selling. Like, I would never suggest that. Even if I was a meathead, I would never say just eat any old meat. Like, meatheads don't even say that. But yeah, that's what Paul says. But food does not command us to Elohim, for we are none the better if we eat, nor any worse for not eating. He says that. How can you believe that? Like, the whole Bible is about food. It's literally the whole thing. Sorry, people that think that it's about keeping commandments. Yes, all the commandments are about food. Every single one. The very first one, don't eat of that tree. It's food, right? As soon as they get off the boat, okay, you can eat this and that. What's in the garden? What's the commandments? About food. You can eat of these trees and not these trees. Like, all the important stuff is always about food. And literally, what is the one thing about humans that's more true than anything? You are what you eat. Your food directly affects every aspect of your life. Go vegan. It's really important. Anyway, but so those 3 little verses that he put right there, they go directly against the decree in Acts. It says, but concerning the nations who believe, we have written and decided that they should keep themselves from what is offered to idols. Can't eat that. So Paul, you can't put these verses here. It says you can't eat what's offered to idols or blood. You can't eat anything that bleeds. That would include any sentient beings. Or what is strangled. Like, even if somebody else kills it, you still can't eat it, right? When they say strangled in a field, people debate with me on what that means. It means you didn't kill it. It means you found it dead. That's all it means. People wanted to eat meat so bad, but they knew it was wrong to kill an animal, so they would be like, oh, well, we just found this one, it got smacked on the side of the road or something, so, well, I didn't kill it, so it's not wrong to eat it. Well, that's still wrong. And whoring. So, thankfully Paul didn't say something like, have relations with whoever you want when you're in the temple. Don't ask any questions like that. Then obviously they would have thrown his books out. But no, it was just about food. And boy, people love to eat their meat. But what is it about this eating meat sacrificed to idols? It is definitely wrong. In Revelation 2, I hold a few matters against you, because you have there those who adhere to the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat food offered to idols. And what does that do? Makes you then commit whoring. So you also have those who adhere to the teachings of the Nicolaitans. What's that? It just means you share your women. The Nicolaitans believe that they believed that the women were part of the commune, so they could all have sex with all the women. It was very, very bad practice. Basically, once they started saying, oh, well, we can eat this meat, next thing you know, they're saying, well, let's just have a bunch of sex too. And it just seems like Christianity these days, right? Letting their teenage kids have these relationships with their boyfriends and girlfriends, and you know what they're doing. Repent, or else I shall come to you speedily and fight against them with the sword of my mouth. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes I shall give some of the hidden manna to eat. And I shall give him a white stone, and a stone with a renewed name written, which no one accepts except him who receives it. Now, that's cool. I didn't actually even notice that. That says he's going to give you some manna to eat. So, Abba always provides the right food. You just have to choose which food is right. Now, I go one step further and say that if you kill an animal with the purpose of eating it, then you just sacrifice to the evil one, which is the same as an idol. So I believe that any meat is all sacrificed to idols, especially if it's kosher or halal. That's basically stamping their idol on it, right? Because if you think about it, and you know that the Nephilim were worshipped as gods, and that those gods actually required animal sacrifices. They're the ones who started the whole thing before the flood. That was the whole reason for the flood. So if those are the ones who wanted to eat the animals, and if sacrificing to them is sacrificing to a demon, if the reason you're killing this animal is just because you're hungry, then you just made your stomach an idol. You just made your belly a demon, right? And you sacrifice that animal for your own desires and lusts. And I think anytime you kill and eat, it's in the spirit of a demonic thing, right? The Clementine recognitions show Peter attacking the animal sacrifices and prophesying that the temple will be destroyed because the priests persist in them. This vegan Peter, consistent with his betrayal in the Ebionite gospel, says, "We have ascertained beyond doubt that Elohim is much rather displeased with the sacrifices you offer. The time of sacrifices have now passed away, and because you will not admit that the time of offering victims is past, therefore the temple will be destroyed, and the abomination of desolation shall stand in the holy place." So, Peter, or Kepha, later tells us, "But Kepha, O benignantly regarding me, lest that separation might cause me sorrow, says to me, It is not from pride, O Clement, that I do not eat with those who have not yet been purified, but I fear I might injure myself and do no good to them. For this I would have you know for certain, that everyone who has at any time worshipped idols, and has adored those whom the pagans call Elohim, or has eaten of the things sacrificed to them, is not without an unclean spirit. For he has become a guest of demons, and become a partaker with that demon of which he has formed the image in his mind, either through fear or love. And by these means he is not free from an unclean spirit, and therefore needs the purification of the mikvah, or the baptism, that the unclean spirit may go out of him, which has made its abode in the inmost affections of his spirit. And what is worse, gives no indication that it lurks within. For fear it should be exposed and expelled. For these unclean spirits love to dwell in the bodies of men, that they may fulfill their own desires by their service, and inclining the motions of their spirit to those that themselves desire, may compel them to obey their own lusts, that they may become holy vessels of demons." So Peter says you can't eat meat without having an unclean spirit. No wonder he jumped up from the tables once he found out that Paul had been telling them they could eat meat sacrificed to idols. It's time to cleanse your temple. If you're watching this, maybe you need to go get the dead animals out of your temple, just like Messiah cleaned his father's temple. The temple in the ancient days would have been appalling to Messiah. It had turned into a slaughterhouse, right? Our Messiah was more like an animal activist on the act of defiance, letting all the animals free, right? He said, "I am the good shepherd." The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, right? I mean, but the next teaching I got coming down the pipe is going to either be the parable of the flesh or the two trees in the garden. But hopefully you got a little insight into what's wrong with Paul, and why people are rejecting his words, and why the followers of Paul get so mixed up into sexual immorality and they're all so sick and fat and overweight, and they all got meat wrinkles. It's because of Paul. You know, how many years of people's lives have gone down the tubes because they were meat eaters, because of Paul's books? You know, a lot of death and destruction because of this guy. You know, you have a whole denominations just way off base because they twist Paul's words. But anyway, hope you guys are having a good day. You're not participating in any of this pagan crap. Hopefully you did not kill a lamb and try to eat it this Passover. That would really be bad. I love you guys. Look forward to seeing you more and making videos again. Talk to you soon. Peace out.